Okay.
Shall I just jump in?
Yes, please. Thank you,
Okay.
Sherri.
This
Sorry.
is part two. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen and hopefully we will get back around. I'm backing up just one slide because I'm not sure exactly when it may have knocked us out.
Yeah,
But anyway,
we
so I
need
was talking about developing curriculum in different um, in different academic environments, from kindergarten, from preschool through higher education. And I'd mentioned that I'm teaching a course that is called Media in a Hyper-Mediated World at my university. And that is actually a course that's open to the entire university students, not just media and communication students, but students in any major. It's part of our Gen Ed, general education program. So within that curriculum, we always want to make sure that there's opportunities for students to create, since the definition of media literacy was access, analyze, evaluate, create, and act. And so creating media is a part of that. But always remember that an effective media literacy educator doesn't teach students what to think. They teach students to think. And that's that tie back to critical media literacy, critical thinking. Even though a lot of the conversation here, a lot of what I talk about has to do with us as individual users, right? To be a media literate person, what is it? What's involved in that, right? So we are at the center. Really, to have a fully media literate environment means everyone is involved. So it means that the creators are thinking about media literacy, the 5 key questions and basic media literacy tenets when they are creating, so that they're thinking about the ethics that are involved. They're not trying to mislead. They are they're clear about who they're talking to and making content that's age appropriate. So that's the creator side. Educators are making sure that they're talking about media literacy in classrooms. Parents are engaging with children and engaging with each other and other adults, where they can actually have sort of welcome these media literacy conversations. What I mean by that is, if you are you're at a party, like, at a dinner party, and people are talking about a TV show that everybody's watching, you might pose a question to people of, I saw that this famous filmmaker is the person who made it. Does anyone know other things that this person has made, where they have been the author, the filmmaker of other movies? Are there similarities between those movies? That's a media literacy conversation, right? Or talking about the casting and why did they cast somebody who was 30 years old to play somebody who was a teenager? Why might they have done that? All of those are media literacy conversations. The other two bubbles there, right? One is government. So there is a need for government regulation in some cases. And then industry is really making sure that the industry itself, so the Metas and Googles and Netflix and others of the world, the big companies of the world, are actually considering these media literacy issues as well. So an example of that is that YouTube has been very resistant for its entire existence to making sure that it's a space that's safe for children, right? They didn't want to do that in the beginning because they wanted they wanted the audience to feel like anything you want to see, you can see on YouTube. So they made it a space where that was possible. And then that space became a place where kids went to, children between the ages of like 6 and 15 are the top users of YouTube today. Like, it's millions and millions of young people are on YouTube. And YouTube really resisted doing anything that would help them to not see inappropriate content, because there's a lot of violence, sexual content, drug content, just even news stories that show people being beheaded or shot, right? Lots of things that kids should not see. No, YouTube said, we're not going to do that. We're going to create a website that's called YouTube Kids instead. And that's great that they did that, but that does not stop kids from being on YouTube. But if they wanted to, they could easily have a tagging system that would allow you to flag something that was okay for children or not, so that when children went on the website, they could, parents could make sure that kids were only seeing appropriate content. Would there still be problems? Of course, but they could do way more than they are. And that's what I mean by industry being involved. So how can we respond to our children's media engagement with imagination and hope rather than fear? right? Even though I'm talking about the things that can happen, I actually think that the things we can all do with media are quite amazing. I assume that you've probably played with AI at this point and how incredible that can be. But we all felt that it was incredible when we got to listen to podcasts, right? That was something that everybody was excited about. Or when we could have on-demand television shows, that was incredible too. So it's not that we want ourselves or the young people in our lives to not use media. We want everyone to use it with eyes wide open, right? With a media literacy mindset. And to that end, I worked on this report. I wrote this report. The report's called The Quality Question: Why Children's Media Must Aim High. And I'm going to stop sharing for a minute because my information about this report is in a different PowerPoint. So I'm just going to switch from one to the other, which just will take a second here. Here we go. All right. So hopefully you're seeing that now. So
Yes,
this
yes,
is,
we're saying.
thank you. This is the sort of driving question of the report and the research that I did. What does it mean to create quality media content for children? And I would submit to you, even though I was focused on children, thinking about what it means to create quality media content, period, is a media literacy question, right? Considering that approach is a media literacy approach. In this case, it was a Fulbright that enabled me to do this research. And I was able to spend time in Sao Paulo, Brazil, in Manchester, England, and in Sydney and Melbourne in Australia. And in each of those places, I spent time with a person or an institution that is known worldwide at being a leader in the children's media industry. So a leader in terms of content that they're creating, in terms of other research that they've done, in terms of their own aspiration to create quality media for children. And these are just some of the people that I met with. So the recommendations for creating quality media content came through scholarly research that I did, interviews with industry leaders, interviews with academic researchers, and then interviews with content creators. And of course, any conversation about, like I'm talking about quality, but you might find yourself thinking, well, how are you defining quality? And that's a great question. And I applaud you if you're actually even thinking about that question, because it shows critical thinking. You're applying that critical thinking to the information that I'm sharing. So I am thinking about it in one particular way, and I'm trying to be transparent about that. If you were doing the report, you might have defined it a slightly different way. But my quality definition was gathered through all those interviews that I made. So thinking about the budget, what's the time frame that you have? So am I creating this great kids show and it's got to be on television tomorrow? Or am I creating this great kids show and I'm going to put it on next year? How much time do I have? What am I trying to accomplish with the work that I'm doing? What does the industry consider quality? Usually that would be about whether they're making money. Is it defined by the government? Are parents looking at it and figuring out whether it's appropriate for their children? And what do kids really want? And the quote here, quality TV helps kids navigate society. It starts and ends with child development. I think is so important because it's really thinking about the person. Again, whether it's child or adult, it's thinking about the audience. Who is the person who's going to take this media in? When you're thinking about these issues as a media literate person, you're thinking, I am a person who is a certain age, has a certain family, has certain values that I uphold. Maybe I have religious beliefs. And all of those come together when I'm consuming the media that I choose. And these were some of the quotes from people that I was interviewing. So after I conducted these interviews, and I did about 80 different interviews, and then researched the more traditional academic research as well. The recommendations, I developed 15 recommendations for creating quality media content, and the 15 fell into these categories. So some of the recommendations were about social and emotional learning, some were about entertainment, some were about cultural understanding, some were about child development, and some about representation. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. The report itself, whoops. So I have a picture. I'm holding one in my hand here. So you can access this report for free. It's a free download, a free PDF that I believe Albert is going to make sure that you have. So you could probably even do a search for it online and get to it, or you can send an email to me and I will be happy to send it to you. I do have some printed copies of it, but for the most part, it's that free download. Just want to let you know it's there. So these are the 15 guidelines. These were the recommendations that came out. I'm going to go through these one at a time, but just as a snapshot, you can see that these are the 15. The first one was about leading with play and playfulness, recognizing that there is no media that a child is going to engage with if it's not fun. And that comes up when in my podcast that I do with kids, where I'm talking to them. It comes up in research that people are doing when they are looking at the kinds of content kids watch. And it comes up with creators who are making content for children. The first quote on there, I think, is great. Nicole Cheek, who is ABC Australia, is the public broadcaster in Australia. And she said to me, is it fun? Because that's the first question. No fun, no kids. Guideline 2, reflect authentically real kids today, right? That bubble over there says, an honesty comes from showing the good and bad, the bad of a person at their core. The notion of being authentic was probably the single most common word that interviewees said to me. And actually, it is probably the single most common word I hear from my students as well when they are thinking about the content that they are most interested in. They are interested in people that are communicating in an honest way that feels connected to who they are and their beliefs. And even though young children won't be able to articulate it that way, you can see in the choices that they make. There's a reason that Miss Rachel is one of the most popular YouTubers. She has a way of communicating that feels like you're talking to a real person. In fact, I've had kids on the podcast tell me that television has actors, but YouTubers are real. Now, we as adults know that YouTubers are not always real, but the feeling they get is that they are being authentic and truthful. And that's what is connecting them. Guideline 3, put children's voices first. I'm just keeping track of time here a bit. Put children's voices first. Making sure that content that we want children, in any content we create, the person who's the audience member is the person you have to have top of mind. So if the goal is for this to be content that children are going to want to consume, watch it, listen to it, play it, it could be a game, that children are their own protagonists in their own stories. They speak for themselves and they have voice. This was a quote from Jenny Buckland, and she's the CEO of the Australia Children's Television Foundation. Guideline 4, support cultural identity. Exposing children to other cultures is one part of that, and doing it in a way that also helps one to feel that their own cultural identity is supported is the other. It's really a little bit of both. There was a feeling years ago that kids would only be interested in watching content that showed their own slice of the world. So it needed to look like the geography of their part of the country, their part of the world, their neighborhood, their block. It needed to look like their house. They had to really identify. But we now know that more recently that has been broadened, and possibly broadened because we have so many global streaming services now, right? So that kids are able to see content, including YouTube, from all over the world. And it has created something that Jackie Edwards calls global nowhereness. That actually can be a danger where, you make a series in France and it shows the Eiffel Tower, but when you're going to export that show to other parts of the world, you redo that scene and you take the Eiffel Tower out. That would be global nowhereness. And actually, we're saying that it's important that we do need to have kids connected to the things that they see around the world. That's how we help them to have a more global view. This is still continuing that same point. Guideline 5, cultivate an appreciation for variety and diversity. So we want, on the one hand, children to feel like they are seen and that their culture is reflected. But on the other hand, we want them to know that variety is good, diversity, difference is good, and that you can enjoy watching a culture that is not your own, and really spread your thinking more broadly. Guideline 6, encourage curiosity and an open learning mind. We can do that whether it's a game that is, or an app that's going to teach you about a topic that you knew nothing about before, but also just the idea of even dialogue in a show. So it could be a scene with two people, like just a sitcom or something, where two characters are talking and one character says, Friday night, this music is going to be performing in the town center. Want to go? And that the other person says, yeah, I've never even listened to that music before, but I would try it. That kind of dialogue is reflecting an open learning mind, and we want to make sure content does that. Guideline 7, convey empathy for others, right? Acknowledge what others may be going through. Many of us feel like we're living in, when you hear people talk about their politics in different countries, they talk about the divisiveness that we see now in politics. You're either with me or against me, right? And how do we change that in the world? Well, one of the things we can do is make sure that content that particularly young people are seeing conveys that empathy, conveys a willingness to listen to others, to be an active listener, to truly understand what others are going through, not because it negates your own, but because we all sort of, I don't know if you know the cliche called, all boats rise. Like when you're doing well, that helps me do well. All of us can do better. Guideline 8, reveal that challenges happen, but perseverance and resilience lead to solutions. So this is part of being real with kids, right? That we want content, we don't want to sugarcoat life, right? Difficult things happen in life. Bad things happen in life sometimes. Scary things can happen in life. But if we persevere and we develop this resilience, we can find our way to a solution. And so we want children to understand that. 9, engage senses emotionally, socially, and developmentally age appropriate. So if you're creating content for any audience, it's key that you know that audience and you respect that audience. If we're making content for kids, we respect what they understand at a certain age. What is scary to a child at age 3 could just be a scary face of an elderly person with a lot, an elderly person with a lot of wrinkles can be a scary face to a 3-year-old or 2-year-old. But when you become 8 or 9, that's not as scary because you probably have met people who look that way. So actually being respectful of the child development stage that child is in. Guideline 10, let it be a little gritty, a little naughty, right? It can't always be people doing the right thing and saying the right thing and going to the right places. We also have to let kids do the wrong thing, drop and crack the dish, throw the baseball through the window, forget to clean up their room, and let children know that that's natural and that you can be a good person and still do things that are a little naughty sometimes. Guideline 11, resonate with children's lived experiences, which I've talked about a bit. Guideline 12, acknowledge health and wellness concerns. So this idea of mental health and that media you consume should not make you feel bad about yourself or about others. And if it does, you really want to try to stop using that. Sally Ann Kaiser runs a production company in the UK. And when I asked her about mental health issues and kids, she said, I always lead with the question, what would love say? What would love do? And, we can only hope everybody would bring that to their content creation. But the idea that what I really think is at the core of what she's saying is, we know that media can impact how we feel. We've all had that situation. You have certainly had moments where media has made you laugh and be in a good mood. You'd listen to music, you feel great, or you listen to sad music and it makes you want to cry, or the lyric really touches you in a way that reminds you of something that makes you want to cry. Media can be very impactful on our mental outlook and our mental health, and we want everyone who's creating media to be mindful of that. Guideline 13, strengthen critical thinking about content and media literacy. So everything that I talked about in the first half, making sure we're mindful of media literacy. Guideline 14, invite caring adults to participate. So kids don't need to look at content or play video games or play with their apps by themselves. Co-viewing and having a parent nearby or an aunt or uncle or an older sibling can be a wonderful experience as well. And guideline 15, which is the last one, offer a hopeful ethos. We want children to feel that their content is respectful of who they are and what their lives are really like, especially if they're having a difficult time in life, but to offer hope, right? To not just leave them with terrible social issues and there's nothing that can be done, but to leave them with hope. But ultimately, we know it is a business and money will be involved in all of these decisions. I'm going to just really skip ahead to the end so that because we're sort of at time here. This was a quote from Greg Childs, who runs the Children's Media Foundation in the UK. And I think even though media literacy is important for everyone, if we could get children to be thinking about media literacy and creators and governments be thinking about it early on, we can think about Greg's sentence. Is it too easy to shrug off responsibility when you know there are other people that are creating content, other people that are making regulations, other people tending to their children? To the tech companies, there's no such thing as childhood. The tech companies act as if they are their own nation state, no national boundaries, no regulations, but it all matters when it comes to kids. And so I hope when we think about media literacy, we'll think about what children need really first. Here's contact information for me, my website, my email address, and my Instagram. I'm going to leave it up here just for a minute before maybe not, I'll put it into the chat as well so I can stop sharing. I'm happy to continue this conversation with anybody who has questions, because I know many of you are not going to be watching this right now. And so please feel free to reach out and take a look at, say, center.org. That's our website. And I hope to hear from some of you and hope you enjoy the rest of your master's program learning.
Thank you, Sherry, and sorry again for the problem with the with the Zoom. I don't know if someone here, Malak, Lorena, Jabir, maybe, or even Ollie. I don't know if you had some comments, some thoughts you want to share. Any question before we end the Zoom? No, no comments today.
That's
Um,
okay.
no, it's really interesting what you shared, but and I really think that it's interesting that media literacy should start from really young age. So you're talking about kids. We're talking about kids today, so that's really good
Yeah,
because that's what our society needs for this
agreed.
everywhere.
And I often say if a child is old enough to be using media, then they're old enough to have a media literacy, to be media literate in an age appropriate way. So even a 1-year-old that is being handed an iPad to do a little game or something, even that parent can have a conversation with the child. Just even the gestures of when we use it, when we don't, we take it out and we use it, we put it away. Even that can be something for a 1-year-old to start to learn. So we can have conversations and then scaffold it as kids get older.
Yeah, true. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Malak, and thank you all of you for joining us today. And again, what Sherry said, if you had some thoughts, especially the people that will be watching this later, if you had some thoughts, something you want to share with us, or some questions, you can reach me or you can reach Sherry. And so thank you. Thank you, Sherry, for your time. Thank you, Ollie, too, for joining us today. And well, we're going to end
Bye,
this
everyone.
now. So
Okay.
thank you and had a good day and a good afternoon.
Thank you. You too.
Bye, everyone. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye. Thank you.